Dean Martin stopped mid-song. The entire room held its breath. And he extended the microphone toward the man in the front row. The man everyone in the room knew, the man everyone feared, the Mafia boss. The Copa Room. Sands Hotel, Las Vegas. February 1964. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and expensive perfume. 300 people packed into burgundy leather booths and white-clothed tables. Champagne glasses caught the stage lights. The orchestra played behind Dean in perfect synchronization, brass and strings weaving through his velvet voice. Dean was halfway through. That's Amore, his signature number. Relaxed, effortless. That trademark half-smile playing on his lips. The audience loved him, always had, always would. He made it look easy. That was the genius of Dean Martin. He never seemed to try. But tonight was different. In the front row, center table, sat a man who didn't applaud. Didn't smile. Just watched with eyes like black stone. Vincent, the Blade Costello. Everyone in Vegas knew the name. Most were smart enough never to say it out loud. Costello owned pieces of 3 casinos, not officially, of course. The official owners were businessmen with clean records and friendly smiles. But everyone knew who held the real power. Who made the calls. Who decided which acts played which rooms, which dealers kept their jobs, which debts got forgiven and which ones got collected in dark parking lots. He sat perfectly still, flanked by 2 men in identical dark suits. His hands rested on the white tablecloth. No drink in front of him. No cigarette. Just presence. Authority. Menace. Dean had seen him come in 20 minutes earlier, during the opening number. Had watched the maitre d' nearly stumble over himself escorting Costello to the best table in the house. Had noticed how conversations at nearby tables died the moment he sat down. And Dean had kept singing. Because that's what Dean Martin did. He sang. But then, during the bridge of That's Amore, Costello leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. A simple gesture. Nothing threatening on the surface. Except everyone in the room understood what it meant. Dean didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The room understood anyway. Dean let the final note of the song hang in the air. The orchestra held. The audience waited for the next number. Dean didn't move to the next song. He stood at the microphone, looking directly at Vincent Costello. 5 seconds of silence. Then 10. The orchestra members glanced at each other uncertainly. The conductor's baton hovered mid-air. Ladies and gentlemen, Dean said finally, his voice carrying that same easy warmth it always did. We have a very special guest with us tonight. The room went silent. Not the comfortable silence of anticipation. The cold silence of fear. Costello's expression didn't change. But his eyes narrowed slightly. Dean smiled. That same relaxed smile. A man who appreciates good music. Good entertainment. The finer things. He paused. Mr. Costello, I wonder if you'd do us the honor of sharing your thoughts on tonight's performance so far. The orchestra stopped breathing. To understand what Dean had just done, you need to understand how Las Vegas worked in 1964. The performers didn't challenge the men who ran the city. They smiled, they sang, they collected their paychecks, and they kept their mouths shut. Frank might get away with some ribbing because Frank was Frank. He had connections, history, immunity built over decades of carefully managed relationships. But even Frank didn't directly confront a man like Vincent Costello in front of 300 witnesses. Dean had just done exactly that. Costello had come to the Copa Room tonight with a message. Dean knew it. Everyone knew it. 2 weeks earlier, Dean had refused to perform at a private event Costello had requested, a party for some East Coast associates. Dean's manager had politely declined, citing scheduling conflicts. That wasn't how things worked in Vegas. When men like Costello made requests, you didn't decline. You rearranged your schedule. You showed respect. You remembered who really controlled this town. Dean's refusal had been an insult, A public one, once word spread. And men like Costello couldn't let insults stand. So he'd come tonight. Sat front row. Made his presence known. The message was clear. Dean Martin worked in Las Vegas at Costello's pleasure. It was time Dean remembered that. Except Dean wasn't playing along. He stood on stage, microphone in hand, waiting for Costello's response. The extended silence was its own form of confrontation. Costello's jaw tightened. His hands remained flat on the table, but the knuckles had gone white. The two men flanking him shifted slightly in their seats. One's hand moved toward his jacket. Dean saw it. Everyone saw it. "Or," Dean said, his voice still perfectly calm, perfectly smooth, "if you'd prefer, you could come up here and sing a number yourself. I'd be happy to accompany you." He said it with a smile, like he was offering a drink to an old friend. But everyone in the room heard what he was really saying. "You came here to intimidate me. So let's settle this right now. In front of everyone. Are you going to make me bend, or are we going to find out what happens when I don't?" Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. The conductor, a man named Tommy Russo who'd worked Vegas stages for 20 years, later said that moment felt like watching two gunslingers face off at high noon. Except instead of pistols they had presents. And instead of a dusty street, they had the most elegant nightclub in Nevada. Costello stared at Dean. Dean stared back. 5 seconds. 10. 15. Then Dean did something nobody expected. He stepped down from the stage. The orchestra members froze. The audience collectively inhaled. The two men flanking Costello tensed visibly, hands moving inside their jackets. Dean walked calmly across the small space between stage and front row. His movements were unhurried. Casual. Like he was just strolling over to chat with a friend. He stopped directly in front of Costello's table. Close enough to touch. Close enough to be grabbed, hit, shot if that's what Costello decided. Dean extended the microphone toward him. Not aggressively. Not mockingly. Just offered it. "The stage is yours if you want it," Dean said quietly. Loud enough for Costello to hear, not loud enough for anyone else. "Or we can have a conversation like gentlemen. Your choice, Vincent." Nobody, not even Frank, not even Sammy, called Vincent Costello by his first name uninvited. Dean had just done it. For a moment that felt like an hour, nothing moved. Costello's eyes locked on Dean's. Searching for fear. For weakness. For any sign that this was a bluff, that Dean would break if pushed. He found nothing. Dean Martin's expression remained perfectly calm. That same easy smile. That same relaxed posture. Like he was holding a microphone toward a friend, not a man who could have him killed with a nod. Off camera, Dean made a choice no producer expected, because it wasn't for the cameras. Costello's hand moved. Every person in the Copa Room stopped breathing. His hand reached out. Not toward his jacket. Not in a fist. He took the microphone from Dean's hand. The room exhaled. Costello stood up slowly. He was shorter than Dean, stockier, built like a man who'd done physical work before he'd done anything else. He looked at the microphone in his hand like he wasn't quite sure what to do with it. Then he looked at Dean. Really looked at him. And for the first time that night, something like respect flickered across his face. "You got balls, Martin," Costello said, his voice rough, carrying the accent of Brooklyn docks and Newark streets. "I'll give you that. I prefer to call it professional courtesy," Dean replied smoothly. "You came to see a show? I'm giving you one." Costello's mouth twitched. Almost a smile. "Not quite. This how you treat all your guests? Only the important ones." Silence again. But different now. Not hostile. Evaluating. Costello looked at the microphone again. Then at the stage. Then back at Dean. "I can't sing," he said bluntly. "Neither can half the people recording hit records these days," Dean said. But they do it anyway. This time Costello did smile. A small one. Real. He handed the microphone back to Dean. Keep your stage, Martin. You earned it. Dean accepted the microphone with a slight nod. No triumph in his expression. No relief. Just that same easy composure. Thank you, Vincent. And the private event you mentioned? Forget about it. Costello sat back down. I was testing you anyway. Wanted to see if you'd fold. He gestured toward the stage. You didn't. That's worth something. Dean nodded again. Then he did something that would become part of Vegas legend. He extended his hand. Not to shake. To help Costello adjust his chair as he sat, like a maitre d' would for a valued patron. A gesture of service, yes. But also equality. You're a guest in my house now. Let me treat you like one. Costello looked at the offered hand. Then he took it. Let Dean help him settle into his seat. Enjoy the show, Dean said quietly. He turned and walked back to the stage. Calm. Unhurried. Like nothing unusual had just happened. The orchestra was still frozen. The audience sat in stunned silence. Dean stepped up to his microphone stand, adjusted it slightly, and turned to Tommy Russo. Let's give our guests something special. Everybody loves somebody in E-flat. Tommy's hands shook as he raised his baton. The orchestra fumbled into the intro. They just watched their headliner walk up to Vincent Costello, and refused to back down. Dean sang like nothing had happened. Like his heart wasn't pounding. Like he hadn't just bet his life on a handshake and a smile. But what happened next was the part nobody, not even the band, was prepared to witness. Halfway through, Everybody loves somebody. Dean noticed something. Costello was crying. Not openly. Not dramatically. Just sitting very still at his front row table, staring at nothing, while silent tears ran down his face. The two men flanking him noticed too. They looked uncomfortable, uncertain. This was not a version of their boss they'd ever seen. Dean didn't stop singing. Didn't acknowledge it. But he did something subtle. He shifted the song's arrangement on the fly, slowing the tempo slightly, letting the lyrics breathe more, giving the emotion space to exist. The song ended. The audience applauded. Tentatively at first, then building to genuine enthusiasm as they realized the crisis had passed. During the applause, Costello stood up. His associates immediately stood with him. The room tensed again. Was he leaving? Angry? About to cause a scene? Costello walked to the edge of the stage. Dean saw him coming and stepped to the stage edge, crouching down slightly so they could speak without the microphone catching it. "My daughter," Costello said quietly, his voice thick. "That was her favorite song. Everybody loves somebody. She died last year. Cancer. She was 19. Dean's expression shifted. The cool mask didn't crack, but it softened. "I'm sorry, Vincent. Truly. She loved you. Played your records constantly. Drove me crazy." Costello's jaw worked. "I came here tonight angry. Stupid angry. About the party, about respect, about, it doesn't matter. And then you sang her song and I remembered her." Dean finished gently. Costello nodded. He pulled something from his jacket, not a weapon, but a wallet. From it, he extracted a small photograph. A teenage girl with dark hair and her father's eyes, smiling at the camera. "Her name was Maria," Costello said, handing the photo to Dean. Dean took it carefully. Looked at it. Really looked. "She was beautiful. She was everything." Costello's voice broke slightly. "And I don't have her anymore." Dean stood there, crouched at the edge of his stage, holding a photograph of a dead girl, while 300 people watched in confused silence, and made another choice. He pocketed the photograph. "I'll keep this," Dean said. "And I'll think of Maria every time I sing that song. If that's all right with you." Costello stared at him. Then nodded, unable to speak. Dean extended his hand again. this time for a handshake. Costello took it. Held it firmly. "Thank you?" he whispered. Dean nodded. "Come back any time, Vincent. Front row's yours." Costello left quietly, his men following. The room watched in silence. Dean returned to his microphone. He didn't explain what had just happened. Didn't need to. "Let's keep this party going," he said smoothly, and launched into, "Ain't that a kick in the head?" The tension broke. The audience laughed, applauded, drank, lived. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. For the next 8 years, until Dean stopped performing regularly at the Sands, Vincent Costello came to every show. Always sat front row. Never caused trouble. Just listened. And Dean kept Maria's photograph in his dressing room at the Copa Room. Before every performance, he'd touch it once. A reminder that beneath every mask, his cool, Costello's menace, lived grief, love, and humanity. The night Dean Martin faced down a Mafia boss became Vegas legend. But the real story wasn't about courage. It was about two men finding each other's pain and choosing compassion over pride. That's why Dean was the king of cool. Not because he never felt fear. Because he never let fear make him less human.